Welcome to a fireside reading of Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Chapter 106, Ahab's Leg. The precipitating manner in which Captain Ahab had quitted the Samuel Enderby of London had not been unattended with some small violence to his own person. He had lighted with such energy upon a thwart of his boat that his ivory leg had received a half-splintering shock, and when, after gaining his own deck and his own pivot-hole there, he so vehemently wheeled round with an urgent command to the steersman, it was, as ever, something about his not steering inflexibly enough. Then the already shaken ivory received such an additional twist and wrench that, though it still remained entire and to all appearances lusty, yet Ahab did not deem it entirely trustworthy. And indeed it seemed small matter for wonder that for all his pervading, mad recklessness, Ahab did at times give careful heed to the condition of that dead bone upon which he partly stood. For it had not been very long prior to the Pequod's sailing from Nantucket that he had been found one night lying prone upon the ground and insensible. By some unknown and seemingly inexplicable, unimaginable casualty, his ivory limb having been so violently displaced that it had stake-wise smitten and all but pierced his groin. Not was it without extreme difficulty that the agonizing wound was entirely cured. Nor at the time had it failed to enter his monomaniac mind that all the anguish of that then present suffering was but the direct issue of a former woe, and he too plainly seemed to see that as the most poisonous reptile of the marsh perpetuates his kind as inevitably as the sweetest songster of the grove, so equally with every felicity all miserable events do naturally beget their like. Yea, more than equally, thought Ahab, since both the ancestry and posterity of grief go further than the ancestry and posterity of joy. For not a hint of this, that it is an inference from certain canonic teachings, that while some natural enjoyments here shall have no children born to them for the other world, but on the contrary shall be followed by the joy childlessness of all hell's despair, whereas some guilty mortal miseries shall still fertilely beget to themselves an eternally progressive progeny of griefs beyond the grave. Not at all to hint of this, there still seems an inequality in the deeper analysis of the thing. For, thought Ahab, while even the highest earthly felicities ever have a certain unsignifying pettiness lurking in them, but at bottom all heart woes a mystic significance, and in some men an archangelic grandeur. So do their diligent tracings out not belie the obvious deduction. To trail the genealogies of these high mortal miseries carries us at last among the sourceless primogenitures of the gods, so that in the face of all the glad haymaking suns and soft cymbaling round harvest moons, we must needs give in to this, that the gods themselves are not forever glad. The ineffaceable sad birthmark in the brow of man is but the stamp of sorrow in their signers. Unwittingly here a secret has been divulged, which perhaps might more properly, in set way, have been disclosed before. With many other particulars concerning Ahab, always had it remained a mystery to some why it was that for a certain period, both before and after the sailing of the Pequod, he had hidden himself away with such grand, llama-like exclusiveness, and for that one interval sought speechless refuge, as it were, among the marble senate of the dead. Captain Peleg's bruited reason for this thing appeared by no means adequate, though, indeed, as touching all Ahab's deeper part, every revelation partook more of significant darkness than of explanatory light. But in the end it all came out, this one matter did at least. That direful mishap was at the bottom of his temporary recluseness. And not only this, but to that ever-contracting, dropping circle ashore, who for any reason possessed the privilege of a less banned approach to him, to that timid circle, the above-hinted casualty, remaining as it did moodily unaccounted for by Ahab, invested itself with terrors, not entirely underived from the land of spirits and of whales. So that, through their zeal for him, they had all conspired, so far as in them lay, to muffle up the knowledge of this thing from others, and hence it was that not till a considerable interval had elapsed did it transpire upon the Pequod's decks. But be all this as it may, let the unseen, ambiguous synod in the air, or the vindictive princes and potentates of fire, have to do or not with earthly Ahab, yet in this present matter of his leg, he took plain, practical procedures. He called the carpenter. And when that functionary appeared before him, he bade him without delay set about making a new leg, and directed the mates to see him supplied with all the studs and joists of jaw, ivory, sperm whale, which had thus far been accumulated on the voyage, in order that a careful selection of the stoutest, clearest grained stuff might be secured. This done, the carpenter received orders to have the leg completed that night, and to provide all the fittings for it, independent of those pertaining to the distrusted one in use. Moreover, the ship's forge was ordered to be hoisted out of its temporary idleness in the hold, and to accelerate the affair, the blacksmith was commanded to proceed at once to the forging of whatever iron contrivances might be needed. Chapter 107. The Carpenter. Seat thyself sultanically among the moons of Saturn, and take high abstracted man alone, and he seems a wonder, a grandeur, and a woe. But from the same point, take mankind in mass, and for the most part they seem a mob of unnecessary duplicates, both contemporary and hereditary. But most humble though he was, and far from furnishing an example of the high, humane abstraction, the Pequod's carpenter was no duplicate. Hence, he now comes in person on this stage. Like all seagoing ship carpenters, and more especially those belonging to whaling vessels, he was, to a certain off-handed practical extent, alike experienced in numerous trades and callings collateral to his own. The carpenter's pursuit being the ancient and out-branching trunk of all those numerous handicrafts which more or less have to do with wood as an auxiliary material. But besides the application to him of the generic remark above, this carpenter at the Pequod was singularly efficient in those 1,000 nameless mechanical emergencies continually recurring in a large ship upon a 3 or 4 years' voyage in uncivilized and far distant seas. For not to speak of his readiness in ordinary duties, repairing stove-boats, sprung spars, reforming the shape of clumsy bladed oars, inserting bull's-eyes in the deck or new tree-nails in the side-planks, and other miscellaneous matters more directly pertaining to his special business, he was, moreover, unhesitatingly expert in all manner of conflicting aptitudes, both useful and capricious. The one grand stage where he enacted all his various parts, so manifold, was his vice-bench, a long, rude, ponderous table furnished with several vices of different sizes, and both of iron and of wood. At all times, except when whales were alongside, this bench was securely lashed athwartships against the rear of the try-works. A belaying pin is found too large to be easily inserted into its hole. The carpenter claps it into one of his ever-ready vices, and straightway files it smaller. A lost land bird of strange plumage strays on board, and is made a captive. Out of clean-shaved rods of right whale bone and cross-beams of sperm whale ivory, the carpenter makes a pagoda-looking cage for it. An oarsman sprains his wrist. The carpenter concocts a soothing lotion. Stubb longed for vermilion stars to be painted upon the blade of his every oar. Screwing each oar in his big vice of wood, the carpenter symmetrically supplies the constellations. A sailor takes a fancy to wear shark bone earrings. The carpenter drills his ears. Another has the toothache. The carpenter out pincers, and clapping one hand upon his bench, bids him be seated there. But the poor fellow unmanageably winces under the unconcluded operation. Whirling round the handle of his wooden vice, the carpenter signs him to clap his jaw in that, if he would have him draw the tooth. Thus this carpenter was prepared at all points, and alike indifferent and without respect in all. Teeth he accounted bits of ivory, heads he deemed but top blocks, men themselves he lightly held for capstans. But while now upon so wide a field thus variously accomplished, and with such liveliness of expertness in him too, all this would seem to argue some uncommon vivacity of intelligence. But not precisely so, for nothing was this man more remarkable than for a certain impersonal stolidity, as it were. Impersonal, I say, for it so shaded off into the surrounding infinite of things that it seemed one with the general stolidity discernible in the whole visible world, which, while pauselessly active in uncounted modes, still eternally holds its peace and ignores you, though you dig foundations for cathedrals. Yet was this half-horrible stolidity in him involving, too, as it appeared, an all-ramifying heartlessness? Yet was it oddly dashed at times with an old crutch-like antediluvian wheezing humorousness, not unstreaked now and then with a certain grizzled wittiness, such as might have served to pass the night during the midnight watch on the bearded forecastle of Noah's Ark. Was it that this old carpenter had been a lifelong wanderer, whose much rolling to and fro not only had gathered no moss, but, what is more, had rubbed off whatever small outward clingings might have originally pertained to him? He was a stripped abstract, an unfractioned integral, uncompromised as a newborn babe, living without premeditated reference to this world or the next. You might almost say that this strange uncomprisedness of him involved a sort of unintelligence. For in his numerous trades, he did not seem to work so much by reason or by instinct, or simply because he had been tutored to it, or by any intermixture of all these, even or uneven, but merely by a kind of deaf and dumb, spontaneous, literal process. He was a pure manipulator. His brain, if he ever had one, must have early oozed along into the muscles of his fingers. He was like one of those unreasoning but still highly useful multum in parvo Sheffield contrivances, assuming the exterior, though a little swelled, of a common pocket knife, but containing not only blades of various sizes, but also screwdrivers, corkscrews, tweezers, awls, pens, rulers, nail files, countersinkers. So if his superiors wanted to use the carpenter for a screwdriver, all they had to do was to open that part of him, and the screw was fast. Or if for tweezers, take him up by the legs, and there they were. Yet, as previously hinted, this omni-tooled, open and shut carpenter was, after all, no mere machine of an automaton. If he did not have a common soul in him, he had a subtle something that somehow anomalously did its duty. What that was, whether essence of quicksilver or a few drops of hartshorn, there is no telling. But there it was, and there it had abided for some now 60 years or more. And this it was, this same unaccountable, cunning life principle in him, this it was that kept him a great part of the time soliloquizing, but only like an unreasoning wheel, which also hummingly soliloquizes. Or rather, his body was a sentry box, and this soliloquizer on guard there and talking all the time to keep himself awake. Chapter 108, Ahab and the Carpenter. The Deck. First Night Watch. Carpenter, standing before his vice bench, and by the light of 2 lanterns busily filing the ivory joist for the leg, which joist is firmly fixed in the vice. Slabs of ivory, leather straps, pads, screws, and various tools of all sorts lying about the bench. Forward, the red flame of the forge is seen, where the blacksmith is at work. Drat the file, and drat the bone. That is hard which should be soft, and that is soft which should be hard. So we go who file old jaws and shin bones. Let's try another. Aye, now this works better. Hello, this bone dust is... Why, it's... Yes, it's... Bless my soul, it won't let me speak. That is what an old fellow gets now for working in dead lumber. Saw a live tree, and you don't get this dust. Amputate a live bone, and you don't get... Come, you old smut there, bear a hand, and let's have that ferrule and buckle screw. I'll be ready for them presently. Lucky now. There's no knee joint to make. That might puzzle a little. But a mere shin bone, why, it's easy as making hop poles. Only I should like to put a good finish on. Time. If I but had the time, I could turn him out a neat leg now as ever. As ever scraped to a lady in a parlor. Those buckskin legs and calves of legs I've seen in shop windows wouldn't compare at all. They soak water, they do, and of course get rheumatic and have to be doctored. With washes and lotions, just like live legs. There, before I saw it off now, I must call his old mogul ship and see whether the length will be all right. Too short, if anything, I guess. That's the heel. We are in luck. Here he comes. Or it's somebody else. That's certain. Ahab advancing. During the ensuing scene, the carpenter continues sneezing at times. Well, man-maker? Just in time, sir. If the captain pleases, I will now mark the length. Let me measure, sir. Measured for a leg. Good. Well, it's not the first time. About it. There is a cogent vice thou hast here, Carpenter. Let me feel its grip once. So. Oh, it does pinch some. Oh, sir, it will break bones. Beware! No fear, I like a good grip. I like to feel something in this slippery world that can hold man. What's Prometheus about there? The blacksmith, I mean. What's he about? He must be forging the buckle screw, sir, now. Right. It's a partnership. He supplies the muscle part. He makes a fierce red flame there. Aye, sir, he must have the white heat for this kind of fine work. So he must. I do deem it now a most meaning thing that old Greek Prometheus, who made men, they say, should have been a blacksmith, and animated them with fire. For what's made in fire must properly belong to fire, and so hell's probable. How's the soot flies? This must be the remainder the Greek made the Africans of. Carpenter, when he's through with that buckle, tell him to forge a pair of steel shoulder blades. There's a peddler aboard with a crushing pack. Sir? Hold! While Prometheus is about it, I'll order a complete man after a desirable pattern. Imprimis 50 feet high in his socks. Then chest modeled after the Thames Tunnel. Then legs with roots to 'em to stay in one place. Then arms 3 feet through the wrist. No heart at all. Brass forehead and about 1/4 of an acre of fine brains. And let me see. Shall I order eyes to see outwards? No. But put a skylight on top of his head to illuminate inwards. There. Take the order and away. Now, what's he speaking about and who's he speaking to? I should like to know. Shall I keep standing here? Aside. 'Tis but indifferent architecture to make a blind dome. Here's one. No, 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 I must have a lantern. Ho, ho! That's it, 8. Here are 2, sir. 1 will serve my turn. What art thou thrusting that thief-catcher into my face for, man? Thrusted light is worse than presented pistols. I thought, sir, that you spoke to Carpenter. Carpenter? Why, that's... But no. A very tidy, and I may say an extremely gentlemanlike sort of business thou art in here, Carpenter. Or wouldst thou rather work in clay? Sir? Clay. Clay, sir. That's mud. We leave clay to ditches, sir. Achoo! The fellow's imperious. What art thou sneezing about? Bone is rather dusty, sir. Take the hint, then. And when thou art dead, never bury thyself under living people's noses. Sir? Oh, I guess so, sir. Yes, oh dear. Look ye, Carpenter, I dare say thou callest thyself a right good workman-like workman, eh? Well, then, will it speak thoroughly well for thy work, if, when I come to mount this leg thou makest, I shall nevertheless feel another leg in the same identical place with it? That is, Carpenter, my old lost leg, the flesh and blood one, I mean. Canst thou not drive that old Adam away? Truly, sir, I begin to understand somewhat now. Yes, I have heard something curious on that score, sir. How that a dismasted man never entirely loses the feeling of his old spar, but it will be pricking him at times. May I humbly ask if it be really so, sir? It is, man. Look, put thy live leg here in the place where mine once was. So now, here is only one distinct leg to the eye, yet 2 to the soul. Where thou feelest tingling life, there, exactly there to a hair, do it! Is't a riddle? I should humbly call it a poser, sir. Hist, then. How dost thou know that some entire living, thinking thing may not be invisibly and uninterpenetratingly standing precisely where thou art standing now? I am standing there in thy spite. In thy most solitary hours, then, dost thou not fear eavesdroppers? Hold, don't speak! And if I still feel the smart of my crushed leg, though it be now so long dissolved, then why mayst not thou, Carpenter, feel the fiery pains of hell forever, and without a body? Huh? Good Lord, truly, sir, if it comes to that, I must calculate over again. I think I didn't carry a small figure, sir. Look ye, pudding heads should never grant premises. How long before the leg is done? Perhaps an hour, sir. Bungle away at it then, and bring it to me. Turns to go. Oh, life! Here I am, proud as Greek god, and yet standing debtor to this blockhead for a bone to stand on. Cursed be that mortal interdebtedness, which will not do away with ledgers. I would be free as air, and I'm down in the whole world's books. I am so rich I could have given bid for the wealthiest praetorians at the auction of the Roman Empire, which was the world's. And yet I owe for the flesh in the tongue I brag with. By heavens, I'll get a crucible and into it and dissolve myself down to one small compendious vertebra. So. Carpenter, resuming his work. Well. Stubb knows him best of all, and Stubb always says he's queer. Says nothing but the one sufficient little word. Queer. He's queer, says Stubb. He's queer. And keeps dinning it into Mr. Starbug all the time. Queer, sir. Queer. Very queer. And here's his leg. Yes, now that I think of it, here's his bedfellow. Has a stick of whale's jawbone for a wife. And this is his leg. He'll stand on this. What was that now about one leg standing in 3 places, and all 3 places standing in one hell? How was that? Oh, I don't wonder he looks so scornful at me. I'm a sort of strange-thoughted sometimes, they say, but that's not only haphazard-like. Then a short little old body like me should never undertake to wade out into deep waters with tall, heron-built captains. The water chucks you under the chin pretty quick, and there's a great cry for lifeboats. And here's the heron's leg, long and slim, sure enough. Now, for most folks, one pair of legs lasts a lifetime, and that must be because they use them mercifully as a tender-hearted old lady uses her roly-poly old coach horses. But Ahab, he's a hard driver. Look, driven one leg to death, and spavined the other one for life, and now wears out bone legs by the cord. Hello there, you smut! Bear a hand there with those screws, and let's finish it before the resurrection comes a-calling with his horn for all legs, true or false, as brewery men go round collecting old beer barrels to fill 'em up again. What a leg this is. It looks like a real live leg, filed down to nothing but the core. He'll be standing on this tomorrow. He'll be taking altitudes on it. Hello. I almost forgot the little oval slate, smoothed ivory where he figures up the latitude. So, chisel, file, and sandpaper now. Thank you for joining me. I hope you can come tomorrow, same time and place, 5 Pacific at Fireside Reading. Until then, please stay very well. Good night.